Good morning, everybody. The shiur today is sponsored in the schus of Moshe ben Sarah and Sarah Sasha Bas Chaya Rachel for Refuah Shlema and for the release of the hostage Eitan Avram ben Efrat and all of our hostages. May those who need a Refuah Shlema have a Refuah Shlema. May all of our hostages be released immediately. Amen. Okay, Parshas Veschanan. So Parshas Veschanan is a continuation. Again, the whole Sefer Devarim is Moshe Rabbeinu's, I mentioned this last week, Moshe Rabbeinu's last will and testament, if you will, to Klal Yisrael. It's the last 5 weeks of his life where he is saying his last words of inspiration to not just to that generation, but really we have to look at it to every generation. I mean, Moshe Rabbeinu realizes he's writing the Torah here. So everything that he's saying is obviously not only for that generation, but for every generation, ad b'yizrael tzedek until the time. So in all of these Parshas and Devarim, we have tremendous wisdom and tremendous inspiration. Specifically, that Sefer Devarim is really our Parshas, right just before Tisha B'Av, the 9 days, going into Chodesh Elul. This is a zman of tshuva, a zman of inspiration, and clearly, we speak about this all the time, every parsha, when it comes in a certain time period, is connected to that time period. The fact that Parshas Veschanan, no matter what the kvias is, Parshas Veschanan is always Shabbos Nachamu. It's always the Shabbos after Tisha B'Av. So clearly in this parsha, there's a message connected to the Nachama, the comfort of Shabbos Nachamu, right? Shabbos Nachamu, just to reiterate, we call it Shabbos Nachamu because the Haftorah of this week, the section of the prophets that we read, is Nachamu Nachamu Ami, the comfort that Hashem gives to Klal Yisrael after the Churban, that we will be Nachamu Nachamu, a double-fold comfort. We'll talk about that in a moment, what exactly that Nachamu Nachamu is. What is that double-fold comfort? But clearly, this idea of Hashem's comfort to us after the Churban, after Tisha B'Av, is somehow alluded to in Parshas Veschanan as well.
What do you want, sweetheart?
And again, all of the messages of Shabbos Nachamu, Parshas Veschanan, etc., we're now sort of turning away from the Tisha B'Av experience and now moving into the second half of Chodesh Av, which is now our preparation for the month of Elul, the month of Tshuva, etc. So all these Parshas are connected to that as well. So let's start with, I want to get to the Nachamu Nachamu, the Haftorah and the double-fold comfort of, and what is that double-fold comfort. But before we go there, I'm going to share my screen for those who are on Zoom and not here live. I'm going to share my screen and say, I know I'm discriminating against those who are here live. I'm sorry. So this is Parshas Veschanan. And let's just give an overview of what we're about to, the psukim that I want to stress here. And this is Moshe Rabbeinu in our Parsha. We know Parshas Veschanan has the 10 Commandments, has the repetition where Moshe Rabbeinu repeats the Har Sinai story. And he repeats the 10 Commandments, the experience at Har Sinai. And sometimes in the repetition in Sefer Devarim, we see things that did not appear in the first version, at least in the Chumash's first version of the story. And here I'm going to show you an example of one of them. So Moshe Rabbeinu repeats the Har Sinai story, repeats the 10 Commandments. That's why this week in Shul, we're going to stand up when we read the 10 Commandments, just like we do in Parshas Yisro. We stand up when we read the 10 Commandments. Veschanan, we have the 10 Commandments as well. Moshe Rabbeinu, again, is repeating the Har Sinai story, repeats the 10 Commandments, and then repeats an episode that happened at the giving of the Aseret Dibros, at the giving of the 10 Commandments. And we know this, the Parshas Yisro alludes to it, but it's more in Torah Shebaal Peh that it's spoken about more in great detail. But after before I share the screen here, let me go back to We'll share the screen back in a moment. After the first commandment, which is Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I am the Lord your God that took you out of Mitzrayim. That's the first commandment, belief in Hashem. After hearing that commandment from Hashem himself, all the Jewish people expired. Their souls left their bodies. And their souls were brought back into their bodies. They heard the second commandment. They experienced it again. And they said to Moshe Rabbeinu, you hear the rest of the commandments and you tell them to us. So this, because they didn't want to experience that again. That's a difficult experience to experience, death and rebirth again. So this is what Moshe Rabbeinu actually alludes to here. He says it explicitly. Look in Pasuk Chav Dalet here on the screen. This is in our Parshas Nachamu, where he's saying what Moshe Rabbeinu is repeating what the Jewish people said to him. Krav ata, you get close to Hashem. Ushma es kol asher yemer Hashem Elokeinu, and you hear everything that Hashem says. You hear the rest of the commandments. Va'at tidaber aleinu, and then you'll tell it to us. Es kol asher diber Hashem Elokeinu. You tell to us everything that Hashem said. Elecha, to you. V'shamanu v'asinu, and we will hear it and we will do it. Okay, so this is the Jewish people telling Moshe Rabbeinu, we don't want to die again. We don't want to be brought back to life again. That's not an easy experience to go through. So this already happened after two commandments. So kravata, you approach Hashem, you hear everything Hashem says, then you tell it to us, v'shamanu v'asinu, and we will hear it and we will do it. Does anything stick out in that verse, especially the last two words? V'shamanu v'asinu is the exact opposite of Nasa v'nishma. Right? Parshas Mishpatim tells us that pre-Matan Torah, before the Matan Torah experience, when Hashem came to Klal Yisrael and he asked them if they want to receive the Torah, what did they say? Nasa v'nishma, and they're praised for that. Nasa, we will do whatever it says. Nasa refers to we will do, action, Nasa, we will do. V'nishma, and only after we agree to do everything, V'nishma, then we'll hear and we'll understand the reasons for the mitzvahs, the intellectual rationale behind Torah, as much as we can understand. Nishma refers to understanding the depth of Torah. Nasa refers to the action, doing. And so pre-Matan Torah, they respond to Moshe Rabbeinu, Nasa, we will do whatever it is before we even hear it. And then Nishma. So we're committing to do the Torah, committing to accept the Torah, and then Nishma, and then hear it and understand the depth behind it. But what's fascinating is that Moshe Rabbeinu gives us an insight here in Sefer Devarim that we didn't see in Parshas Yisro, that after that, the first two commandments, when they appealed to Moshe Rabbeinu, that you receive the rest of the 10 commandments and tell it to us, they reversed it. V'shamanu v'asinu. And we will hear and we will do. So the fact that the Torah is telling us this is obvious. That's everything in Torah. And these are the lenses through which we have to look at Torah. What is the lesson for us? What's the message and why did they reverse it? Because after all, they were praised for Nasa and Nishma. But obviously, Shemanu V'asinu, there's a message here as well. Okay. We're going to come back to that. But I think this is very much connected to the message of the Nechama of our Haftorah. The Haftorah says, Nachamu, Nachamu Ami. That Yeshayahu Navi says that Yeshayahu Navi, who prophesies about the Churban, says, but after it's all over, Nachamu, Nachamu Ami, you'll have a double-fold comfort. So the question is, what's the double-fold comfort? What's the 2 times Nachamu? All the commentaries speak about this. There's lots of different opinions. I want to share with you one, and if we have time, I don't know if we'll have time, but maybe another one as well. There's a Medrash Rabbah of Eicha that says it's not just the comfort that was double-fold, but everything surrounding it was double-fold. And he quotes a pasuk in Eicha from Yirmiyahu. Chet chata Yerushalayim. Right? We read this in Eicha, in the first paragraph in Eicha. Chet chata Yerushalayim. There's a chet chata is a double-fold sin. So Yerushalayim sinned, chet chata, 2 times, a double-fold sin. And then the punishment, he quotes the Medrash quotes a pasuk in Yeshayahu, that they were struck by the hand of Hashem, kaflayim, double-fold. There's a double-fold punishment. So the Medrash in Eicha says the sin was double-fold. Chet chata Yerushalayim. The punishment, Hashem, kaflayim. Kaflayim means double, that they were struck by the hand of Hashem, double. The punishment was double. Nachamu ami, and the comfort is double. That's the Medrash. But the Medrash doesn't explain what's the double? What's the double sin? What's the double affliction? What's the double comfort? So that's critical for us to understand going into Shabbos Nachamu, because the answer is connected to what is our Aveda today. And that's really how we have to look at the Parsha. The Parsha is Hashem's communication to us. What is our Aveda today? What is our work today? So Yirmiyahu, when the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, Yirmiyahu is the Navi who lived. Yeshayahu lived over 100 years before Yirmiyahu. Yeshayahu prophesied. Yeshayahu lived during the first Beis HaMikdash, prophesied about its destruction, but didn't live to see it. Yirmiyahu actually prophesied, lived during the Churban Abayis, lived during the Bayis Rishon, and then lived during the Churban, and prophesied about the Churban as well, and then lived during the Churban, which is what Eicha is all about. So Yirmiyahu asks the question, Ma of the Haaretz. Why was Eretz Yisrael destroyed? Yirmiyahu pleads with trying to understand what happened here. Ma of the Haaretz. It's a pasuk in Yirmiyahu Perek Tes. Ma of the Haaretz. And the Gemara Masechet Nedarim says that Yirmiyahu went around and asked this question to the Chachamim, to his fellow Nevi'im, and no one really knew the answer. And then Hashem says, and this is quoted in the pasuk, Vayomer Hashem al azvam es teirasi, because they abandoned my Torah. That's why the land was destroyed. And the Medrash Eicha, says on this pasuk in Yirmiyahu that what Hashem is saying is halavai, they only abandoned me and not abandoned the Torah. And again, that's the end of the Medrash. But it's a bizarre, what does that mean? What does the Medrash mean? Hashem says, halavai, they abandoned me and not abandoned the Torah. How do you abandon Hashem and not abandon the Torah? Aren't they one? What does Hashem mean by that? And what exactly does it mean that they abandoned the Torah? And how can one abandon Hashem and not abandon the Torah? What does that mean? So the answer to this, especially, and this is if a lot of people on the shiur have learned Tanya as well, and many on the shiur and who are here now come to my Tanya shiur. And one of the things that the Alter Rebbe, one of the themes of Tanya, I mean, there's the Tanya is the Alter Rebbe's, path in Avodas Hashem, that moyach shalta halev, that through connecting our hearts to divine thoughts and meditation, we could create emotion and serve Hashem with passion. One of the themes of Tanya is that Hashem wants from us. It's not just Tanya, but the Tanya speaks about this. That Hashem wants from us not just robotic action, but Rachmana liba boy, as the Gemara says. Hashem wants our heart. The observance of Yiddishkeit. I mean, Maisa hu ha'ikar, and the action is the main thing. But Hashem wants the action shouldn't just be habitual, ritualistic, robotic, but our Judaism should be filled with meaning and with passion and with understanding of what we're doing and what we're accomplishing. And this is our Aveda now. Our Aveda now, especially in our generation, especially after all these years in Gullus. Our Aveda is to return the Beis Hamikdash. And the one way that we do this is through connecting our thoughts, our passion, our machshava, our kavana, our intention with our action. And this is twofold. To connect our minds to our actions, connect our minds to our hearts. And it's twofold. On one hand, if I would take a poll of everybody listening to this shiur, whether you're listening live, you're listening on Zoom, you're listening to the recording, if I could somehow take a poll and I would say, who here believes in Hashem? Who here believes that Hashem is oversees everything and is omnipotent, knows all, sees all, is intimately connected with every one of us? Every one of us would raise our hands, Kamat. Every one of us have that belief. So we all have a belief in our minds. We all have the intellectual belief that Hashem exists. But if that's the case, if that was truly the case, if we truly believed, how could we ever act in a way that is opposite of Hashem's ratzon? How could we ever sin? How could I ever be negative to my spouse? How could I ever get angry? Right? The Gemara says anger is akin to idolatry because anger is a recognition that it didn't come from Hashem. So obviously what happens is we're human, we're fallible, right? There's a disconnect between our mind and our heart. Our minds believe, in Chassidus this is called emuna b'makif. In other words, that the emuna that we have hasn't truly permeated us to the extent that it completely transforms all of my actions. The emunah is makif, which means it's there, but it doesn't permeate me entirely. And the Gemara gives an extreme example of this, like the Ganav, who davens before he breaks into the house that he should be successful. He believes in Hashem. He's davening. He's davening to Hashem, but he's davening to what? To break into a house. So there's obviously a disconnect between his emunah and his actions. I mean, that's an obvious, ridiculous case, and we all laugh at that. But the reality is, we are all that Ganav to a certain extent, because we all believe in Hashem. We all believe in Hashem's omnipotence and Hashem's perfection and Hashem's infinity, and yet it doesn't always manifest itself in the way that I act, in the way that I speak, in the way that I behave. So our Aveda, over in general, but certainly now, in our generation, but in our time period, after we just commemorated the Churban Bayis Rishon and Churban Bayis Sheni on Tisha B'Av, after commemorating the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, our Aveda now is to connect our minds, our belief, to our action. That's on one level. The next level is that even when we have the action, even when I do the action, to connect my mind, my kavana, to connect that action with intention, with everything that I know in my mind that this action is accomplishing and producing. I just came back from shul a few hours ago. I put on tefillin. I created every person putting on tefillin, every person who prays creates a massive spiritual revolution in the celestial realms. Draws down Meichin Elohim, the supernal wisdom of Hashem, draws it down into myself, into the world. Did I have that kavanah? Did I have that intention when I put on tefillin a few hours ago? Honestly, no. I did the action. I went to shul. I wrapped tefillin. I prayed. But I didn't connect it with passion, with intention. So this is the second level, to connecting our mind to our action. So there's two levels. One, that what's in our mind should actually translate into our actions. And two, that even when we have the actions, that the action should be connected to our minds, connected to our intent, connected to our kavanah. And so these two levels of connecting our mind to our heart. I mean, this is the whole entire theme of Tanya, that the mind should permeate the heart. It's not easy. It's easy to have amuna intellectually, but it's not easy for that to actually, with consistency, manifest itself in the way that we behave, and even when we have the action, that it should manifest itself in the passion within that action. So when we don't have the action at all, we just have the amuna. We believe in Hashem. We all believe in Hashem, but sometimes I don't have the action. Sometimes I don't behave in a way that my amuna would mandate. That's called azivas haTorah, abandoning the Torah, because we've abandoned the action. We don't have the action. I have absolute amuna, but then I came home and I got angry at my wife, or I got angry at my kids, or I didn't do a certain mitzvah, or whatever it may be. I abandoned the action. That's azivas haTorah, abandoning the Torah. Then when we have the action, I do behave properly. I put on tefillin, I do the mitzvah, but I do it dryly, robotically, habitually, without any passion, without any life, without any warmth, without any. That's azivas Hashem. I have the action, but I abandon Hashem. There's no Hashem in the action. There's no godliness in the action. It's a robotic action. Does it accomplish? Yes, absolutely, it accomplishes. You put on tefillin, you absolutely accomplish. But what you accomplish is so much infinitely greater when we connect it to our minds. So this is abandoning Hashem, abandoning the Torah. Abandoning the Torah is when we don't have the action at all. We believe in Hashem, but we don't have the action. Abandoning Hashem is we have the action, we don't have the passion. And both of these were an issue by the Churban of Bayis. Both Bayis Rishon and Bayis Sheni to different extents. In Bayis Rishon, in the first Beis HaMikdash, there was in a certain sense abandonment of Torah. There was murder, there was idolatry, there was gilui arayos. They believed, but their actions didn't. That belief didn't manifest itself in their actions. There was an abandonment of Torah. Their actions were missing. In the second Beis HaMikdash, they were very frum. They kept the Torah. There was no more murder, no more idolatry, no more gilui arayos. They were very frum, but they took the Beis HaMikdash for granted. It became ritualistic. It became habitual. Bring a korban, sacrifice an animal. It lost all of its meaning. They had the action, but they weren't connecting it to spirituality. They weren't connecting it to Hashem. That was the abandonment of Hashem. So in both Churban Bayis Rishon and Churban Bayis Sheni, there was this abandonment of Torah and abandonment of Hashem. And so this is our Avodah today. To connect what we know, to connect our minds to our hearts and to our hands, to our actions and to our emotions. So when we're lacking this, when we have there's two elements here. There's lacking the action, and then there's abandonment of Torah, and then there's lacking the kavanah, lacking the intent, abandonment of Hashem. And so Hashem responds midah keneged midah, right? That's in general. Hashem, and we say this all the time. Hashem, the Chassidus teaches us this. Hashem reacts to our actions. So when we abandon Torah, when we abandon the action, the result of that is exile from the land. The entire point of the land is not simply a homeland for Klal Yisrael. The entire point of Eretz Yisrael is to saturate it with the actions of Torah and mitzvahs. Is that Eretz Yisrael is the greatest keli, the greatest vessel to be able to observe Torah and mitzvahs. So if I'm in the land, but I'm not observing Torah, that brings exile because the entire point of the land is missing. So it's midah keneged midah. So when I'm missing the action, the resulting punishment, if you will, the resulting response from Hashem is exile from the land. When I'm missing my passion when I have the action, but I'm missing the passion, then there's a second punishment, and that is a hester panim. If I don't feel Hashem, if I'm just doing it robotically, if Hashem is not a part of it, if there's no passion, there's no warmth, the mida connected mida, the spiritual response to that is what's called Hester Panim. Hashem hides himself from us. So there's two levels here. There's the physical exile from the land. That's one, the physical punishment. And then there's the spiritual punishment of Hester Panim, where we don't feel Hashem. Because even if we're exiled, we could still have a connection to Hashem, a relationship with Hashem. We could feel Hashem. But when Hashem hides himself, conceals himself, when we forget him, so to speak, then he, quote unquote, forgets us. Hester Panim doesn't forget us, but hides himself, conceals himself, so his presence isn't felt. And this is what the Medrash means. Hashem says, Halavai, they abandoned me, but don't abandon Torah. At least have the action. Don't abandon Torah. Halavai, abandon me. Don't have the meditative efforts. Don't have the kavanah. Okay. But at least don't abandon Torah. This is what Hashem is saying. At least have the action so that it won't result in exile. That's what Hashem is saying. And so this is the when Yirmiyahu says, Chet Chata Yerushalayim. Chet Chata Yerushalayim, there's a double-fold sin. This is the double sin. Lack of action and lack of kavanah, lack of intention. Lack of action results in exile. Lack of intention, lack of connecting what I'm doing to Hashem results in Hester Panim, Hashem concealing himself from us. That's the lux of a kaflayim. That's the double-fold punishment. And so this is the Nachamu, Nachamu Ami. This is the double-fold comfort. The comfort will be brought. Hashem brings the comfort, but we have to bring it about. We bring down that comfort through, number one, strengthening our actions so that our what is in our mind, our belief, actually manifests itself in the way that we behave. That brings comfort by fixing the exile. When we are observing again, Hashem brings us back to the land. That's one level of comfort. Geula, bringing us back to the land. The second level of comfort, when we do things with passion, when we connect our actions to our intention, then there's no Hester Panim, then we live with Hashem in a revealed way. Hashem is no longer concealed from us. We can feel his presence. That's the Nachamu, Nachamu Ami. So they're both critical. Action and intention. And this is what we're meant to rectify now. This is what the Navi is telling us. Nachamu, Nachamu. But it doesn't happen on its own. It's not just going to happen if we're sitting on the couch waiting for the Nachama. We bring about the Nachama. That's our job now, through fixing our actions, through fixing our mindset, through fixing the double-fold chait, we bring about the double-fold Nachama. And this is alluded to in our Parsha, in Parshas Nachamu. Let's go back. That's what's alluded to in the, look in Pasuk Chaf Dalet, where the last words, V'shemanu v'asinu. Here they say, again, pre-Matan Torah, they said Nasa v'nishma. Action is the most important thing. But as soon as they heard from Hashem, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, what is that commandment? What is the commandment of I am the Lord your God? It seems like it's a statement. It's not a commandment at all. It is a commandment. It's a commandment of emunah. It's a commandment of what we believe. It's a commandment to attach that belief to the coming actions of the rest of the 10 commandments. That we're not just observing them because they may make sense to us, because they're rational. We observe them because Anochi Hashem Elokecha. So once they heard the Anochi Hashem Elokecha, they understand that the action alone is not enough. They have to connect the intention of I am the Lord your God into the action. V'shemanu, we will hear, is the intention. V'asinu is the action. After they hear Anochi Hashem Elokecha, they say V'shemanu v'asinu. Now we realize that the action is not enough. But for Shemanu, we have to hear, we have to have the kavana, we have to have the intention, ve'asinu, and connected, ve'asinu, and connected to our actions. That's what they're saying. And that is what will heal the gut. That was back then to that generation, but it's a message to every generation. This is exactly what will heal the gullus. V'shemanu v'asinu, the twofold, the doublefold, rectifying our kavana and rectifying our actions, connecting our mind to our heart, to our emotion, to our kavana, and connecting our mind to our actions. That's the Nachamu Nachamu. And this is the rest of the pasuk. Look at the rest of the next few psukim. Look at the continuation of the verses. As soon as they say v'shemanu v'asinu after hearing the first two dibros, after hearing the first two commandments, once they understand this is the message that Hashem is saying, the action is not enough. I have to do the action with passion, with vibrancy. I have to rectify both. Then what happens? V'yishma Hashem has killed divreichem v'dvarchem alai. Hashem, Moshe says to Klal Yisrael, Hashem heard your words, v'shemanu v'asinu. Hashem heard your words that you said to me. Vayomer Hashem alai, and Hashem said to me, this is Moshe talking, Shemaiti is killed divrei amazeh. I've heard what the people are saying. Asher dibru lecha, what they told you. V'hetivu kol asher deberu, and it's good what they're speaking. Hashem says it's good. They understand. They've done well. That's exactly the message. We have to have both. And then Hashem continues in the next verse. Mi yitain. Mi yitain is an expression in Hebrew like halavai. Halavai. Mi yitain is like halavai. V'hayalavavam zeh lahem. The halavai, that this is what should be in their hearts. And look what Hashem says. Two statements. Liyira esi, kavana, intention, to have awe of Hashem. And connect that, the lishmor es kol mitzvosai kol yomim, to observe the commandments all the days. To have both. This is exact. Halavai, Hashem says that they have both. This is what brings Yeshua to Klal Yisrael. This is what brings the redemption from exile and the revelation of Hashem's presence to us. The lack of Hester Panim, the lack of Hashem's concealment. This is what brings both. Liyira Eisi, the intention, when we connect what we're doing to with passion, with vibrancy, we're connecting it to Hashem, that removes the Hester Panim. When we live with Hashem, Hashem lives with us. V'lishmor es kol mitzvosai, and the physical action is what brings us back to the land. So Hashem says, this is l'man yitiv lehem l'vneihem l'elom. This, if they keep this in mind, halavai, this is what they need to have, both of these, so that l'man yitav lehem, so that they should have goodness, which means being back in the land, the ultimate goodness, having the Beis HaMikdash, living nehem l'elom, for their children forever. This is the recipe. This is the recipe. This is the refuah for Tisha B'Av. This is the refuah for Churban. This is the refuah. This is the healing for exile. Liyira esi, kavana, v'lishmar es kol mitzvosai, an action bound together. And then when we have both, leich omer lehem, you'll be able to tell them, lechu la'aleichem. Go back to your tents, which is a reference to the Beis HaMikdash. This is what will bring us, this is what will empower Mashiach, the Moshe Rabbeinu of our generation, who is Mashiach, to say to the Jewish people, Lechu la'aleichem, return to your tents, which means the Beis HaMikdash. All of that is alluded right here in Parshas Veschanan. So this is the doublefold comfort of Shabbos Nachamu. And this is the Chet Chata b'Yerushalayim. And the Chet Chata is the lack of intention and the lack of action. And therefore, Laksa Miyad Hashem Kaflayim, we're punished with both exile and Hester Panim. And this is the Nachamu Nachamu. When we're able to connect intention with action and improve on both. And this is the call of our Parsha. This is the call of the Haftorah. The Nachamu Nachamu is there, but we have to change to bring it about. We can't expect the same actions to bring about different results. So that means we have to bring about the change. Just very quickly, I had a whole other section that I want to do as well, but I'm running out of time, so I'm just going to touch upon it. But this is a whole shiur in and of itself, a completely separate but very much connected uh, explanation of the Nachamu Nachamu that I saw in a sefer that it's connected to the double expression of Noach in Parshas Noach, right? Elo told us Noach, Noach ish tzaddik. These are the generations of Noach, Noach, and all the Meforshim ask, what's Elo told us Noach, Noach ish tzaddik? Why the two times Noach? It's obviously repetitive and superfluous. Elo told us Noach, well, ish tzaddik. So why the Noach, Noach? So what's interesting is that one of the in the story of Noach, we all know the story of the generation of the flood, who was immersed in sin, and therefore Hashem brought a flood to destroy the world, and then Hashem made a covenant with Noach that he would not bring this flood again, and the covenant was, of course, the rainbow, the keshes. But what's fascinating is that every time the rainbow is mentioned, and I want to show this, I'm going to share the screen. Every time the rainbow is mentioned, I'm going to run out of time, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to share the answer here, but I'm going to try to. Look at every time the rainbow is mentioned. Here's this Parshas Noach. In Pasuk Yud Gimel, Es kashti nesati ba'anan. My rainbow I will place in the cloud. Look in Pasuk Yud Dalet. Hakeshes ba'anan. The rainbow will appear in the cloud. Look in Pasuk Tes Zayin. V'haisa keshes ba'anan. Again, the rainbow will be in the cloud. It's fascinating. Every time the rainbow is mentioned, the cloud is mentioned. Why? The cloud's not part of the covenant. The rainbow's the covenant. And yet every single time the rainbow's mentioned, the cloud is mentioned. Why? So I saw a beautiful explanation. Again, it's not connected to what we previously said, but it is connected as well, because everything in Torah is connected. That there's two levels of spiritual degradation that happens to us when we sin, when we don't behave properly. On one hand, we do the physical sin, and that obviously separates us from Hashem and has all kinds of negative spiritual ramifications. But what is even worse than the actual sin, or what could even have an even more detrimental, spiritually detrimental effect on us, is the depression or the dejection or the sense of worthlessness that comes to us after the sin. We feel guilty, we feel depressed, we feel dejected. And then the problem with that is that we feel, if I'm already sinning and I'm already dejected and depressed, what's the point? There's no help for me. I might as well just be a hedonist, and I might as well, which is what happens. This is what Pirkei Avos says, Avera Gereris Avera. The more I sin, the more spiritually insensitive I become, and the more I just fall into further sin. That's the depression and the dejection that comes from the sin. And as the Alter Rebbe says, in a certain way, depression is not a sin. He's not talking about biological depression. He's talking about the spiritual feeling of malaise after I sin, that it's all, what's the point of it anyway? He says, in a way, that's even worse than the actual sin, because the depression will lead you to further sin. Because, and he says this, and this was the deterioration of the Dor HaMabul. They sinned, and then they felt, once they sinned, what's the point of it all anyway? There's no point. And this is what Noach was meant to teach the people. Noach was meant to teach the people, number one, their actions matter. Their actions are profound. Their actions have a clear effect on the physical and spiritual worlds. And number two, even when their actions don't line up to what they're supposed to be, don't measure up to the ideal of how they're supposed to live, the koyach of tshuva, the power of tshuva that Hashem put into the world, that we can reverse course. And to such an extent that we can even spiritually erase what the sins that we have done. And there's a whole map of tshuva of how to accomplish that. So this is what Noach was meant to teach the people. Number one, the power of their actions, and number two, the power of tshuva. And this is alluded to when he's born, when Noach is born in Parshas Bereshis. Lemach, who is his father, says he's called Noach. Why? Yenachamenu ma'atzvenu. I'm sorry, ma'asenu va'atzun yedenu. That he will bring us comfort, says Lemach. He will bring us relief. Ma'asenu, from our actions, uma'atzun yedenu, from the toil of our hands. In other words, he's going to be a person who will help us out, help us in our actions, to help us with our toil. But the deeper understanding of that is Yenachamenu. He was meant to bring Klal Yisrael. Lemach was prophesizing here. Yenachamenu, not Klal Yisrael, humanity. He's meant to bring humanity, the comfort. Yenachamenu. Noach was meant to bring them the comfort of understanding Masenu, the power of our actions, Va'atzvon Yedenu, and the power of depression. Atzvon is Lashon Atzvos, which is depression. Noach was meant to tell them they have the ability to do tshuva. This is the Noach. This is the double-fold language of Noach, because Noach had two jobs. And so when we think about that, this was the comfort that Noach was meant to bring humanity, which was, of course, his ultimate failure, that he didn't do that. He was meant to bring them to an understanding that their actions were powerful and that they have the capacity to do tshuva. This is our comfort. This is Noach. Noach, the word Noach means comfort. This is our greatest comfort, understanding that our actions matter. We're not just twisting in the wind of creation. Our actions matter. And even when we fail in the realm of action, we could do tshuva and we could rectify and we could repair. This is our greatest comfort. And this is why the keshes, the rainbow, is always connected to the anon. Anon is ayin nun nun. Nachamu ami is an acronym of anon. What Hashem is telling us is the greatest nachama, the greatest comfort, the double-fold comfort, is understanding the profundity of our actions and understanding we have the capacity to do tshuva. That's the greatest comfort. And so it's a little bit different than what we were saying before, but it's all interconnected. Just to conclude the shiur, our greatest comfort, the Nachamu, is the recognition that we have the power to bring geula, that we are not helpless in this current gullus, that if we fix our actions, if we connect our minds to what we're doing, if we fix our actions and we fix our kavanah and we recognize that we have the power to do tshuva, then we will experience Emirat Hashem. We will actually bring about the Nachamu, the double-fold comfort. May we experience the Nachamu, both with the Nachamu of coming back to our land and the Nachamu of the removal of the Hester Panim with Mashiach Tzidkenu, B'mheira v'yameinu, Amen. So Emirat Hashem, we will experience that, experience the Geula, experience the Nachamu, but it's important for us to recognize and realize that we are the ones who are bringing it about. Okay, let's just conclude with Tehillim 121, as we always do, in the schus of our hostages. We'll give tzedakah for those who are here. We'll give tzedakah, and I encourage you listening to the recording, or those who are on Zoom, to also give tzedakah and to share with us and say together with us Tehillim 121 in the schus of our hostages, in the schus of the IDF, in the schus of Klal Yisrael, and all of our brothers and sisters of Klal Yisrael, wherever they may be. Shir Lamaloi Sesenai Harimi Ayin Yavo Ezri Mi Marine Ace Shemayim Vioretz Ayitin Raglech Al Yanim Shemrecha Hine Yanim Lishan Shem Yisrael Adinai Shemrecha Neitzich Ayad Yaminacha Yeh Mama Shemesh Leikacha Virech Balayla Adinai Yishmarcha Mikara Yishmer Es Nafshecha Adinai Yishmer Tzescho V'Yecha Mi'ata V'Yad Eilam. Thank you very much, everybody. May we all experience the Nachamu Ami, the true Nechama of Geula, of the removal of the Hester Panim with Mashiach Tzidkenu B'mheira v'yameinu. Amen. Have a wonderful week. We'll see everybody next week. Emir Tzashem.